Oh, now you done it.
Overwatch and the Guardian, defenders of the truth. Overwatch and the Guardian, fighting from the booth. They'll fight for the real story, wherever it's hidden away. Overwatch and the Guardian are there every day. It's Overwatch and the Guardian against the narrative. The enemy fighting to save the day. They never give up, they're always there, forcing the normies to take red pills every day. Overwatch and the Guardian, defenders of the truth. Oh, Overwatch and the Guardian, defenders of the truth. Overwatch and the Guardian is the code name for the team that won't quit. Its purpose to force the normies to swallow the red pill against the narrative. A ruthless force determined to keep everyone asleep. They broadcast the truth on Rumble, on clouds dropping red pills every week. Overwatch and the Guardian, the narrative is weak.
We can't let it end like this!
It's
too late.
Defenders of the Overwatch and the Guardian. Overwatch and the Guardian. Overwatch and the Guardian. Overwatch and the Guardian.
What's up, brother?
What's it going, brother? How's it going? How's it going? It's Friday night, baby.
It is. And typically I'd be doing the daily dose right now, but we didn't have this show last night. You had some family engagements, so we pulled it off to today. And I was going to do the daily dose, and I started looking at the time. I'm like, man, I don't got time to do my regular show. So I'm like, let's just jump in the Overwatch and the Guardian. Let's do a show. We had some topics that we wanted to talk about. So for everybody out there on my channels, Friday night Rumble, or Friday night, what we're doing is instead of the daily dose tonight, we're gonna do Overwatch and the Guardian, myself and Alpha. Hope you guys enjoy it. And then for my audience, right after this, I got a live Q&A going on. And just premium subscriber on all my channels. Go out there, subscribe on my channels, and I'll be doing that live Q&A afterwards because we had that scheduled for Friday night. And then Alpha, man, there's a lot of shit happening, dude. And you know, we could talk about Iran, we could talk about the DOJ, we could talk about all of that stuff, but there's something bigger happening here. There's something that I think all this other stuff is distracting us from. And I'm telling you that what is not being discussed is actually the real freaking story. And I think it's coming to a culmination point. I think it's coming to a crescendo. And I think that we're about to find out a lot of what has been actually going on. And I think that everything that is occurring right now is actually all connected. It's all interconnected to this. What are your thoughts? Because in your intro, bro.
So two things. First, there is a lot going on. You know, magic show. And we got the soundboard back, baby. We got the soundboard back.
You get special cool little sounds like...
Yeah, I mean, it's the default ones that are set up with them. I haven't put in my goodies. I'll be doing
like
that.
The robot voice and shit.
Yeah, well, I got the one that makes everybody laugh. Let me see. This is the one everybody seems to laugh. So
it is this one right here, man. What's up? Walking Overwatch on the Guardian, everybody. We're doing this. No,
we are not doing a show with that voice going on. Maybe one day we could do like we'll do a show where we'll be in these special character sounds the entire time. But no, two things. One, you know, my apologies, but not really an apology for yesterday, you guys. You know, my son he's a senior this year in high school, and really big event. And he had been making sure to keep me updated. Hey, dad. Hey, dad. So I knew this was something close to his heart. He wanted me to be at. And I was just like, let's go. Let's do it. And I was very, very, very proud of him. I'm very blessed for the son that I have, as well as my daughters, but he is my only boy. So there's that. The second part is, today, very busy day. My mom sold the house that, that I grew up in, good portion of my life. And so me and my little brother went over there to finish, moving some of the last things out and taking things to her storage. And I'm going to bring this into tonight's show. And I'm sitting there and I walk into the room where I grew up. And as a kid, that room was huge. It was big. And I walk in there and I'm like, I feel like if I stretch out my arm a little bit, I could touch one wall to the other. And I'm looking, it's just, everything smaller, and I open up the closet door, and on the inside of the door is the drawings, all the drawings and scribblings and sketches that I did as a little kid. Still there. Moments in time, data points.
Dicks.
some, there's,
and they were done, people, with crayons. That's why he's a Marine.
Crayons and marker, baby. Crayons and
That's
marker.
right.
But I'm looking at this and I'm like, I made those, close to 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And they're still there. They still exist. So I'm present in something that I created that hasn't moved its spot one bit in nearly 40 years. And I kind of walked around the house, and as I walked around the house, the side yard, I could see a memory of when a memory I've shared on these shows where my father took me on the side and was like, tackle me. Very pivotal moment in my life. I'm looking at, the dining room floor, which at one point, was dirt, and I'm looking at all these things and I'm like, I've gone older and this home's gone smaller in my perspective. But when I walk outside, the world hasn't gotten smaller to me. So why does my home where I grew up and spent such a large portion of my life seem smaller? But when I walk out, the world seems to keep growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it almost made me feel like, is it because the system keeps doing memory upgrades, or are we looking at, RAM expansion? Like, when I grew up in my home, was the simulation, for all humanity at that point, maybe 1 gig. And now the simulation for all humanity is like thousands of terabytes. Who knows, man? But the point I wanted to make was I was in a place that I had spent multiple moments of time, data points, memories, and each one of those things was a real event. It was for me. And now we get into this conversation. It's going to be, I'm telling you, tonight's conversation, folks, is going to flip your lid. It is going to flip your lid. And I'm asking myself, these things existed back then. They didn't tell us about it. There were some leaks, some whistleblowers, some things like that, but they existed back in the 80s. How much of our world is a theater in the respects of they're telling us what we see? I mean, let me start off with this, and then we can get some ads in. But let me ask you this question, Josh. Have you ever been walking through your house, or maybe even driving, and you're like, you look in the back seat, and you're like, there's no one there, but I feel a presence, man. Like, am I tripping?
Yeah.
And or in your home, this happened a couple nights ago. I'm working, and I know I saw a shadow. But the baby gate's there, so I know no one came in or exited the kitchen because I would have hurt the gate. But I also know that I saw a shadow. It wasn't an issue of fatigue or anything. So it's just, there's so much to the world, and it seems like we are right now at that point in the road where there's some people that want to tell us in government and some people that don't.
So it's the metaphor of what's called the veil is being lifted. All right. And there's multiple variables of this understanding, but the original mythological idea comes from the Egyptian goddess Isis. Now, Isis was the goddess of fertility and of knowledge and intellect. And it's said that she wore a veil, sometimes over her eyes or over her whole body. And that behind that veil, no man had ever lifted it. And that if a man ever lifted it, he would learn the secrets of the universe. And then the mythology goes that Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus came and lifted the veil and learned the secrets of the universe. He taught them to his 4 disciples and sent them to the 4 corners of the earth to restart civilization after the Great Deluge. Now, when we talk about lifting the veil, I believe what this is completely anthropomorphized and metaphorical. What do I mean by that? Is that when we start to look at mythology, especially kind of Egyptian mythology, so forth, what we begin to see is correlations and parallels to things that are happening cosmologically, whether it's the grand calendar cycle of the precessional cycle, our transit of our solar system around the galactic plane, or whether it's just solar cycles that are occurring, natural cycles that happen on the Earth, lunar cycles, these types of things, is that all of these have a profound effect on human psychology, human mind, and the archetypical nature of expression. So when we talk about lifting of the veil, I believe that this is actually something that is ingrained within the universe and the context of conscious evolution, that species that are conscious within this universe, there are certain points within time and space that this begins to amplify and happen at a faster pace and rate. And I believe that right now we are going through one of those points in evolution, if you want to talk about it. I'm not talking about Darwinian evolution. I'm talking about conscious evolution, that we are going through one of these. And what it has to do with, and this is the best theory that I can come up with, and I actually had an NYU professor of cosmology on my show who was a NASA consultant talking about this. And I proposed this theory, and he actually liked the theory. But the theory is simply this, is that our solar system transits the galactic arm, known as the Orion arm of the galaxy. Now, that Orion arm is held together by gravity. Whatever gravity is what holds it together. At the center of that Orion arm is very, very dense gases and matter and particles and these things. And at the outer fringes is less dense. At the top of that arm, it's polarized in 1 degree. And at the bottom, it's polarized in another degree. Well, our solar system actually kind of bobs back and forth between that center of that arm. So it goes through immense dense periods and then different polarization, then less dense periods at that polarization, then comes back down and goes to dense again, but then a negative polarization and less dense and comes back up. And so my theory is that as our sun begins to transit these different polarizing effects and higher densities of cosmic particle bombardment, the sun has to adjust its solar sheath, the solar wind that actually protects us from cosmic ray bombardments. And what that means is the sun has to increase its activity. And when it increases our activity, we have massive things that occur here on this planet. What do I mean by that? Is you have cataclysmic events, you have various different geomagnetic switches, you have anything from that to higher energy states that actually derive from the sun. And if you go listen to Elon Musk, he actually talks about this. He goes, listen, if we took all the nuclear power plants in the world and we built a nuclear power plant in every single city in the United States of America, and we did that for 100 years, we would still be less than 1% of the output of the sun daily in energy. Now, I want you to think about that, is that 99.999% of all energy in this solar system comes from the sun. 99.999% or 99% of all mass in this solar system comes from the sun. The sun is the greatest source of all energy, and it is the most profound effects on this planet. So if the sun has to adjust its energy potentiation, its energy potential because of increased cosmic ray bombardment, then that's going to have a profound effect on our planet. And what I believe is that increases evolutionary development on this planet, or stimulates evolutionary development on this planet, because evolution is not some gradual climb that happens like this. It actually happens at very sporadic moments in time. And this is actually on Space Revolution this last week with General Quast. This is what he actually talked about in the context of technological evolution. that we don't go through this kind of progression of technology nice and smoothly, is we hit these spurts, and each spurt builds upon each other. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about here, but in the context of conscious evolution. Now, why does that matter to what you said? Is because we're going through one of those spurts now, and my idea is that consciousness itself grows and becomes more fuller and more observant of the natural reality, which means that things that might have been hidden prior to that time can no longer be hidden. We become more intelligent, we become more observant, we become more susceptible to understanding the world around us, and we become smarter. And because of that, secrets and things that were hidden from us can no longer be kept secret and hidden from us. And so therefore we come into what we call the Great Awakening. We come into this awakening time period where people begin realizing the truth and seeing the truth, simply because it's always been in front of their eyes, but they never took the time to actually notice. But now, because we're going through this process of this increased energy cycle and our consciousness is amplifying itself to a new state of evolution, you're beginning to notice more and more of all of these patterns that existed in front of you that you never saw before. And this is what we call lifting the veil. And that's where we're at right now. And that's why you're having those types of experiences.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question, and then we'll do our ads. And then I want you to, answer that question on the other side of these ads, so you have a chance to think about it. While me and my brother were moving these things into storage, we had a dolly, right? And so we got this dolly and just stacked it, right? Because you get to the point where you're just like, just tired of making all these trips, right? How high can we load this dolly before we start playing Jenga with our mom's valuables? And so I'm pushing, he's pulling, and I'm pushing, he's just like, well, no, come to the other side and pull it. And so I started thinking later, I'm like, what expels more energy? Pushing or pulling? And which one is a preferred method? And when you're pushing and when you're pulling, does the item being pushed or pulled, is it exerting any energy? Or is it just going along with whatever's pulling it or pushing it? And then in that conversation that I want to have here, what is better? For humanity to be pulled into the Great Awakening, or to be pushed into the Great Awakening? And I know you want to start firing off. But I want everybody to take time to think about that, and we can rock these ads. Do you have some that you want to roll with?
Yeah, I got if you want to go ahead and accept your Rumble wallet, I'll go ahead and read it.
All right, fire off.
All right, whenever you're ready. And 3, 2, 1. They can cancel your accounts, freeze your cards, decide what you're allowed to buy, say, or support. Big banks and financial institutions have total control, and they use it. That's why financial independence matters now more than ever. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a wallet built for real freedom. With Rumble Wallet, you can control your money. With Rumble Wallet, you control your money, not a bank, not a government, not a tech company. Buy digital assets like Tether, Tether Gold, and Bitcoin in one secure place. No permission, no middleman, no cancel button. When you want to support the creators like Alpha and myself, you can actually believe in, you can use the Rumble Wallet app to directly tip content creators securely, instantly, and without interference. This isn't a credit line that can shut off. It's your wallet permanently. Yours to protect your future, yours to protect your family. When the system fails, when institutions turn on their own people, financial sovereignty is the difference between security and vulnerability. Rumble Wallet isn't about politics. It's about freedom, ownership, and protecting what's yours. So take control today. Download Rumble Wallet now and step away from the big banks for good, true ownership, true protection, true financial freedom. Wallet.rumble.com.
And it wouldn't let me do that one, so I have another one that I'll roll with, which is cool. And so let me bring them up on the screen. Here you go. And you'll see this QR code on the screen. If you're like, I don't see any QR code, what QR code are you guys talking about? You got to come to Rumble. You'll find the links there. And so with this one, folks, yes, it's up. The Boar Cider. Hey, guys, you know how dialing in your optic can burn through boxes of ammo and half your weekend? And most expensive if you're here on the West Coast. Well, not anymore. With the Boar Cider, you can zero any optic in under 90 seconds without firing a single shot. Yes, you heard that right. This thing is a total game changer. Zero faster than ever. Fits anything from 7 or 0.17 to a 50 cal, no ammo, no range, USB rechargeable. Wow, you're not even gonna be. I was like, what kind of batteries you got in here? USB rechargeable, ready to go every time, whether you're getting prepped for hunting season or just like keeping your gear dialed in. The bore will save you time, money, and a whole lot of frustration. To grab yours, just scan the QR code that's on the screen right now or head over to mcgtac.com/alpha bore. That's bore, BOAR, to get the faster, easiest way to zero your optic. Again, the faster, easier, smart way to zero. Ready to dial it in? Scan that QR code or visit mcgtac.com/alpha bore now. And again, you'll find those links in the live chat. And if you're watching the replay, you'll find those links down in the description below. So, brother, did you have a chance to kind of think about what I presented to you there before we got into the ads?
Yeah, and you know what? It really depends on a few different variables. In the context of like Newtonian physics or Newtonian dynamics, whether you're going to push or you're pulling depends on the circumstances of what is being pushed and pulled and the environment of where it's being pushed and pulled. Are you trying to move an object up a very, very steep incline? Are you trying to lift it straight up against the forces of gravity? Are you moving on a surface that has massive friction and resistance? So there's a lot of dependencies about that. And this is why your question has two different answers. It depends on the person. I think that some people, and honestly, we can probably sum this up with ideologies or ideological factions or religious or spiritual factions, is that certain factions of people are going to have to be pushed into this awakening. Well, other factions of people are literally being pulled into this new reality. Like our audience right now, they are the ones being pulled into it. They've had this feeling deep inside them for a long time, this yearning for more and understanding and more truth. And they see the significance of what we're talking about, and that they go in and day out trying to research and discover truth and meaning within things because they are being pulled in to this new framework of how consciousness operates. On the other hand, then you get the pessimist or the liberal or the traditional conservative, who we call normies or lefties, that are completely oblivious to how the world operates and works. And they only see things in a very, very narrow ideological preference or a very strict religious bias, and that they can't deviate from that. And this actually derives back to the protocols of natural law, of how the understanding of natural law functions and operates. There was a great author out there. And so one of the things that I've been doing a lot of research on over the last 15, 20 years is early 20th century occultism. And you can't even really call it occultism. We call it the rebirth of awakening. And the reason we call the 20th century the rebirth of awakening, because it was really a reinterpretation of 19th century ideas that came about through a lot of occult and esoteric societies and authors. In the 1900s or the 20th century, the 1900s, you had the ability to basically mass produce literature during this time. And you had a lot of people out there that were introduced into these various different esoteric and occult worlds, which would then kind of converge these ideas into a grand theory or synopsis. One of those publishers was called Yogi Publishing, and they were out of Chicago, Illinois. And then when you start to do your research on Yogi Publishing, they published about 10 different books. And a lot of all the books had different authors. One of them was Yogi Ramasatha or something like that. But when you break it all down, another one's called The Three Initiates, and that's a book called The Kybalion, which everybody's probably heard of. And that the majority of the people out there that talk about the book The Kybalion have no fucking clue what they're talking about on the book The Kybalion. They say this is this ancient book from medieval times and predates into the land of ancient Egypt, written by the hands of Thoth himself. No, it was a book written in the 20th century by a guy by the name of William Atkinson. There was not 3 authors, there was one. William Atkinson was a lawyer who lived in Chicago, owned Yogi Publishing, went by various other different pen names to write multiple other books. He was very affluent in occult secret societies. And what he did is he converged the ideas of Hermeticism, Rosicrucian philosophies, Gnosticism, and Kabbalah into one idealistic framework that he called the Kabbalah. And he delivered it in a very, very hermetic framework by the context of what he calls natural law and the 7 hermetic principles of how natural law organizes. Now, we're not going to get into the 7 principles of natural law, but I want to get everybody the gist of it. Basically, the 7 principles described in the Kybalion, they're not telling you what the universe is. It's not telling you what God is or meaning is. It's not even telling you how it works. What it's describing is the framework of how consciousness, your mind, your awareness, your soul interacts with reality. And that interaction is what we call the foundations of natural law. Natural law deals with how man interacts with reality. What are the laws that dictate how you interact with your reality? That's natural law. So once you understand that, now you can deviate out into all of the understanding that there's a set of laws of how you interact with your reality. Okay? Now, people are like, well, what do you mean, like, set of laws? Well, number one is all is mind. Your mind is the key component. And if my mind is here, then God's mind is outside of me. So everything that I'm interacting with is God's mind, and this is my mind right here. So number one is that everything is mind. So anything that is possible within mind is possible within the interaction of that reality framework. And then you get the ideas of everything is vibration. You get the ideas of the law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect is actually one of the most important ones that come out of the 7 hermetic principles, because it doesn't deal with Newton's laws of motions as many people would suspect. And Newton even knew this because Newton was a Rosicrucian and a Hermeticist truly at heart. He was an occultist at heart. He actually went to Egypt and studied the Great Pyramid and all the other pyramids and the pyramid mysteries. But the law of cause and effect, when you get into occultism or esotericism, is one of the most misunderstood principles. Now, we tend to believe that the law of cause and effect is as if for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
That's what I've heard.
Truthful, right? What it actually is it's dealing with the mind, because in the 7 hermetic principles, the one thing to always understand is everything preceding, everything after the first law, which is everything is mind, the all is mind, everything correlates directly back to that primary. That everything correlates directly back to it's all mind. So when we talk about the law of cause and effect, what realm is it operating in? It's operating in the realm of mind. So cause and effect. It's telling you that as a mind, as a conscious interactor within our reality, you can be in one of 2 states of existence. You can be in the state of effect, or you can be in the state of causation. And think about it like this. There's a quote I used to tell people all the time, specifically when they were wanting to create their own business. And I said, you go to work every day for 8 hours a day and you receive a paycheck. And what you don't realize is that paycheck is nothing more than a bribe for you to forget about your dreams and to work for somebody else's. Because that's the truth. The person who owns that company, you're working for them and they're paying you with that bribe of a paycheck to work for their dreams, not yours. In other words, for that 8 hours or 10 hours, however you're working a day, you are a slave to that system. You are bound to that system, that you are reacting all day long to that system that controls you. Therefore, you're creating no causation for the benefit of yourself. You're completely in a state of of reaction. And this is another prime example of this. Think about social media. How do people react in the world? If you go out there and you say something, have you ever had a Karen react, or you ever had a lefty react to you? They react emotionally. They don't react from a point of creative knowledge or understanding or intelligence. They simply react to the world outside of them. So our environment is continuously bombarding us with all different types of things. If you strip away the human aspect of it, when you just look at the electromagnetic waves that are interacting within our reality, is that you have light and you have air and you have temperature and you have noises and you have trees and you have birds and you have houses. I mean, you have so much stuff that you're interacting with. And what's happening is that your body your body's taking it in and your brain is processing it. And then it goes through a filtration system. Then your brain dictates and says, hey, this is what I believe is out there, right? And then from there, you begin to interact with that environment. Well, here's the thing. How much influence does that environment have over the perception ability of your reality? Immense, massive amounts of control over your perception of reality, because the brain itself is very regimented. We know how the brain operates in this construct. So in understanding that is, if you begin the process of kind of draining yourself out of the system and understanding exactly what I just said, you can begin to train your mind and your body to not react to the environmentals around you, but instead interact with the environmentals around you. Have you ever seen a yogi? A yogi can sit there and meditate for 72 days nonstop in the same position through rain and snow. The temperature can drop 80 degrees to -10, and he can just sit there and not move one bit, not disturb his breathing. Why? Because he's not reacting to the environment around him. He's interacting with the environment around him because he understands the profound law of cause and effect, that he becomes a creator in the reaction of the reality. Or sorry, a creator in the interaction of reality, and not a causation due to the effect of the reality on him. That's some pretty deep shit.
It is. And because, I apply that principle in, almost daily. And, everybody knows I do my cold plunges, I submerge my entire body, take my head down under. And then from that moment on, I'm like the bottom of my lip down is in water and extremely freezing temperatures. Now, when you get in, there's that shock value. Right? Your body's like, yo, get us out. Like, why are we here? All you got to do is put your leg out and we can make this go away. Right? Because it's like you're cold. Your body starts to shiver because it wants to warm itself up. But in my mind, I tell myself 60 seconds, 1 minute. And then, my watch will go off because it does that little vibration every minute while I'm in there. And so that I feel that vibration on my wrist. I'm like, all right, we're at 1 minute, 1 more minute. And, I'm applying my breathing techniques. And I get to the point where it's cold. And I'm trying to make this make sense. And it's hard to describe. But the water temperature is cold. I can feel it cold. But I'm not feeling cold anymore. And I'm not talking about numbness, because, I can still feel my toes, pushing against the edge of the tub. I do these number counts with my fingers, right? Because I want to make sure that I really do challenge myself. Like, how can I be accurate with, fingertips touching a certain fingertips? Like, there's a series of things that I do, to make, the mental game stronger. But the reality is I'm in freezing cold water, but my mind is been able to take over a level of control to where it's not overwhelming for me, that I'm in there, I'm fine. Maybe I'm listening to a tune or something like that that's going on. Now, this is all fine and dandy, but here's the part where there's a twist, right? Plot twist. Usually somewhere around that 4.5 minute to, 5 minute mark, it doesn't matter how strong my mind's gotten, I can't suppress how cold that water is now. And that temperature starting to get there to it's like, all right, it's time to get out, right? So there's my mental reality that did take control of the situation, kind of, one of the principles, at least, that you're talking about here. But then the reality itself at some point says, no, you're going to face what I'm putting in front of you. You can't mental game your way out of this. How does that apply to what you're saying in real life?
Oh, awesome. So a few years ago, I was listening to this guy talk, and he was a doctor, an anesthesiologist. And he was talking about the mental realm and the world that you live in. And one of the things that he said is that, do you know what kinesiology is? The study of kinesiology of, like, if you have pains in your left shoulder, that means you got women problems and stuff like this. And the reason is there's a real science behind this. And he goes, imagine people, one of the tests that we do for people in the context of longevity is we ask them if they can touch their toes. Okay. And he says, a lot of people, they can't touch their toes. And he says, listen, this has nothing to do with flexibility and stretching out. And let me tell you why. He goes, have you ever been under anesthesia? And the person's like, yeah, I have. And he goes, you ever seen doctors manipulate somebody who's under the influence of anesthesia? It doesn't matter what their body type is, how overweight they are, what shape they are in, if they stretched out that morning or not. They can move their body and contort it in any different way, shape, or form. Your hamstring is like twice as long as your actual hamstring, which means that you don't have to stretch your hamstring out. He says that the tension and stress that's actually in your muscles and your tendons is mentally derived. I want you to think about that for a second, because that means that the reactions that are coming from your body in that coldness, your body is entrained within a system, right? Cold is cold, hot is hot. Yeah, things that are hot will burn you. Things that are cold will burn you and put you into hyperbaric shock or hygrothermic shock, right? Absolutely, for long exposure and duration. But have you ever seen the monk that goes up into the Himalayas and then sits there for 17 days in negative 30-degree weather with nothing but underwear on? And he meditates and he walks out completely fine with no frostbite? That's real. It's scientifically studied. How does he do that? How does he not die? How does he not get hypothermia? Because he is mentally in control of his autonomous nervous system. In other words, he is controlling the reactions of what's happening into his body and increasing the biological functions within his cellular metabolism to increase the heat within his body. And he's doing that consciously. Now, what does that mean? Is he superhuman? No, he's just learned how to hack the system. The reason that it gets cold for you and you have to fight through it with pure sheer will is because you have not had that level of training that monk in Tibet has had. And we can all, I haven't either. And I would cry like a little baby for 30 seconds into cold water, right? But this guy has had that level of training. But what has he trained? He didn't train his body. He trained his mind. He trained his mind how to control cellular metabolism to increase the heat of his body instantaneously so he could survive for 4 or 5 days in negative 10-degree weather and be completely warm and melt snow on his skin anytime it touched it.
This is a perfect segue into setting up the main topic tonight. Is it only Josh because he's trained his mind? Or is there a secret DNA out there that has given some of us the ability to have different attributes, whether it be the attributes the yogi has, whether it's someone, you have this brain that works, far faster than most human beings that are out there. It's
trying to say I'm genetically engineered by aliens.
It's a compliment, it's made me a fine looking specimen, this Zeus, I'll go for it. Thank you. But no, is there a secret DNA out there? Has there been a modification? And as we get into this conversation, I want to play a quick short clip here that goes back to July 26th of 2023. This is Rep Nancy Mace. And she's asking some questions here. And then we have a series of clips that we're going to show to you guys tonight. Because the narrative is telling us we're not alone. So take a listen to this. Tell me what you think.
Craft stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
If you believe.
So we've referenced that video clip on a lot of different episodes, and there are people who have seen it. A lot of people still haven't seen it, and our audience is growing. I want to make sure everybody's seen it. Doesn't say aliens. Doesn't say the Palladians, doesn't say reptilians. Doesn't say the green guys, doesn't say the yellow guys. Do got some clips lined up for you guys where those guys are referenced. He says non-human biologics. Now, back in July of 23, when this was said, there was a certain way I took it. Did you hear what they just reported on what went up with the astronauts on Artemis 2?
Oh, I got it. I got it right here.
I knew you did. I was like, one guy that knows where I'm probably going to talk. This show's not scripted, folks. We just talked about, we give each other ideas and things we want to talk about, but we do not script the shows.
So I can pull this up. Hold on, give me 1 second. I got the clip right here. It's not a clip. It's just a visual.
That's it.
NASA is flying a groundbreaking experiment called Avatar on Artemis 2 that could change healthcare for astronauts and people on Earth. The project uses a tiny organ on a chip device made with bone marrow tissue from the actual Artemis 2 crew. These USB-sized chips will study how radiation and microgravity affect human tissue in deep space. The data could help create personalized medical kits for future moon and Mars missions, while also advancing faster, safe drug testing and treatments back on Earth.
Now, Josh,
a period of about 40 minutes when you will be out of contact with the Earth.
That's when we will be closest to the moon, farthest from the Earth. But it also is a human moment, and I would love for us to have a moment of togetherness, for humans to just go, hey, there's a part of humanity that's not in touch with the rest of us. And let's just get them all back. And then we can go back to the hustle and bustle.
Now, interesting enough, first black man to be furthest from in space, and people are like, dude, no, seriously, that's fucking cool. First Canadian, first woman. That's actually really cool. And people are like, space is fake and gay. Guys, if you watched Space Revolution the other day with General Quast, he said something that I hope you paid attention to. And I said, General Quast, what do you say to the people in the chat that are calling space fake and gay and NASA fake and gay? He goes, well, we got an AI organized supercomputer on the southern pole of the moon. I log into it. I can see it. I put it there. Like, he goes, my team put it there. We launched it. It's there. What do you say to that? Like, well, you really can't argue with that. And if people want to, we can get into the whole, the illusion of the space program, why NASA is quote unquote fake. But I want to go back to what you're talking about, the DNA part here, because this is actually really interesting in the context of the conversation we're about to get into. So number one is a few years ago, I had Dr. Michael Sala on one of my shows, and we were discussing, he's the founder of exopolitics.org. Got a lot of good information. I think a lot of some other fringy information, right? But he was talking about how Antarctica is utilized as basically a trade interexchange for humans and extraterrestrials. And that human beings, children primarily, are traded with extraterrestrials, that we go out there and we trade extraterrestrials. We trade with extraterrestrials, and a lot of the kidnapped children in the world are taken to Antarctica, and then they're shipped off with alien species, and we don't care what they use them for. At least that's what he was saying. And my co-host at the time asked, well, what currency? What do they trade for them? And he looked back at us and he said, DNA. He goes, think about DNA as the blockchain of the universe. Every single thing on this in this universe that has DNA has a unique strand of the representation of life that exists in the blockchain of life. And that DNA becomes the most valuable asset in the entirety of the universe, because it's one of the things that's the most diverse amongst everything and completely unique unto itself. And I found that really profound. And we've learned a lot about DNA since Watson and Crick discovered it in the 1960s. And a few things that we learned about DNA is that we used to believe that DNA was hard-coded. You ever heard this? That, oh, well, alpha, that's hereditary, so you need to be careful. That world doesn't even exist anymore. That's just nonsense these days. That science is obsolete. What we now learn is something known as epigenetic control factors. And what epigenetic control factors truly means is that your DNA is expressed through variations of how the environment is how your body is affected by the environment. In other words, environmental phenomena express your DNA. So what happens in the womb when a fetus is first born after that zinc spark and begins to develop, what's happening in the environment of that mother is actually incredibly relevant to how that DNA is going to express within this baby. That's why in one of the episodes we talked about listening to opera music and listening to classical music as a mother who is pregnant with an infant in her belly is so profound because it has profound effects on the DNA expression. So when you go into the context of maybe Josh is a modified alien hybrid, maybe, or maybe Josh has just had a lot of different things in his environment that have produced different genetic variations of expressions that is different from everybody else. When he started with a genealogy that was from his mother and his father, 23 chromosomes from each, but configured in such a unique way that there's no other match to that DNA in the entirety of the universe. And then you put him into an environment with complete invariance throughout its whole structure, and now you get expressions of those gene types that are profound, that can be genius, that can be savant level, or you can get ones that are disastrous, that are cancer forming, right? You never know. So that's my thought on the whole DNA thing. Now, do I believe that there is actually, the topic of the show, is the U.S. government making hybrid humans as declared by Matt Getz? And if you want to pull that clip up, we can watch that clip, and this will begin the conversation.
Let me share 2 clips before we get to the main clips, right? And they're short. So let me go with this one first. And I believe this one's also with David Grush as the whistleblower.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will. It's probably not the right parlance, but no kidding, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
So quick comments to this one before we go to the next one is he was very selective with his words, and you caught what he said about the spacecraft.
So there's a few different things, and I'm intimately familiar with the story of David Grush. If people don't know, Game Tech Politic and myself actually met on a X Space the night before the debrief article and the Dave Grush story actually broke, and we talked about all the stuff that was talked about in the congressional hearings, and we actually had contacts that knew the people that David Grush was talking to. And I'll leave it at that, and I'm not going to go much further into that part, but this is what I want to point to you, is when you understand that David Grush is not a first-hand experiencer. David Grush did not go into these black programs. David Grush did not see the craft. David Grush was not somebody who was in WUSAPs or USAP projects. He is a second-hand information. He is being told information from certain people and then relaying that into his reporting in Arrow, and then he whistleblows and says the world needs to know about this, and then reports on his reporting from secondhand information. So that's the number one thing that we have to keep in context. Okay. The number two is the credibility of the people that came to David Grush. The thing is I know we know kind of few people that have came and talked to David Grush. They've been out there, and their credibility is actually pretty good. The psychic spies and stuff like that came and were working with the Air Force for craft retrieval, these types of guys. And there's other ones that, Jason Sands is another one. Jason Sands, Air Force, the 1990s, Nellis Airfield. He talks about his experiences. And I believe Jason Sands. I know Jason Sands. I believe Jason Sands. And, there's another Pokemon that was just unredacted a few months ago. I don't know if I believe his story, but this is another one that's in that context. But David Grush has also talked to people that are actually in the USAP and WUSAP programs, that are currently active in them, that have dealt with the technology, that have dealt with the crash retrievals, that have dealt with the entities and beings and non-biologics that were recovered. And one thing that he said that is correct only in correlation to certain parts of this is that I don't know if spacecraft is the right word. And he says it's kind of like the not the right parlance. And he's right on that. And this is why a lot of people actually condemn Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar was on Joe Rogan again. He's got his movie releasing, and he calls it anti-gravity, and he tries to explain this anti-gravitic phenomena that he experienced at S4 at Area 51. Number one, I believed Bob Lazar's story. I don't think that Bob Lazar has the educational background or understanding to actually understand what he was dealing with. And so when we say anti-gravity or spacecraft, we're not in the right mind context to understand what we're talking about here. When Representative Luna or Nancy Mace says interdimensionals, I love it when Eric Weinstein always interjects and goes, I got a PhD in mathematics from Harvard and I understand interdimensionality. And what are you trying to define interdimensionality as? And that's where things get obscure, because the word interdimensionality in the spiritual community or the physics community and the math community are all different things. But what David Grush is trying to say is we don't have words to really describe how these craft operate, how they travel, or where they come from. The only concepts that we can begin to understand with that is the idea of interdimensionality. And people begin to think about multiple dimensions of space-time and folding space on top of each other. That's not how it works. And I'm going to tell you that right now. That is not how it works. But even the term interdimensional that David Grush has used multiple times is not the right term. We can get into this in a little bit because it's going to actually make a lot more sense.
Well, we need to do a part two. We can do a part two too, because I want to make sure we get into this conversation too. But I also did make note that he said they either crash or landed here.
Yeah, I love this part.
In other words, like they didn't originate from here. They crash or they landed here. But he also doesn't describe, what that journey may have looked like. Was it a portal? Was it, from outer space into our atmosphere? There's obviously we don't have much more information in that conversation, but I did note that he's a smart person. He's like you. He's one of those people that I listen to it's not just listening to what they say, but how they choose to get you there. That's so conversation.
I actually want to comment on what you just said, but I also want to just address two comments I saw in the comments here on YouTube. One is it's an interdimensional vehicle, and another person says transdimensional. And I asked to these people something that we talked about the other night. Define that. What do you mean? How do you define an interdimensional vehicle? And if you say, well, we have the three dimensions, length, breadth, and width and time of space-time, and that there's this fourth mysterious dimension and it somehow curves all space. No, that's not how it works. And we know this because that whole geometric perspective comes from GR, general relativity. General relativity, for anybody out there who's never studied Einsteinian physics, general relativity, special relativity, general relativity takes three different geometries that were mathematical geometries. They don't even really exist. They're just mathematical constructs of geometries. And he converges them together. That makes no sense. Okay? And here's the thing, is it doesn't make any sense. And he converges them together. In other words, gravity, general relativity, only works within a constructed geometry that doesn't exist in the real world. And this is what I was talking with Quast about, is general relativity states that mass distorts space and time. But space and time have zero attributes to them. They have no attributes whatsoever. They're just a geometry. And that mass somehow distorts that geometry. And every time that you look at this within the physics books, the book that I have up there, the two that I have over there, it talks about in a singular planar dimensionality. Okay? Now, that is completely the antithesis of any logic or thought of how gravity actually works. Now, General Quast and people, you got to understand, That man knows way more than he's leading on to. He said, well, I describe gravity as compression. And I said, oh my God, that was it. And I went on like a 20-minute rant on why it is compression. And if you want to understand gravity, think about a pebble being dropped into the ocean. Okay? A pebble being dropped into the ocean. The moment that pebble hits the ocean displaces from the mass, right? But not only does the ocean displace, the ocean pushes back on the pebble with the equivalent proportional amount of force of displacement. That's a compression onto the pebble. That's gravity. That's gravity, perturbation or mass perturbation moving through this field we call the ether or space-time that actually has attributes. And this is why in the 19th century it was called the lumiferious ether. And Michelson-Morley experiment is said to have disproved it. No, the Michelson-Morley experiment didn't have the right conceptuality of the experiment. It was reproduced in 1992 because they had a derivative shift in the orbits of GPS satellites over Earth that were experiencing some type of decline in their orbit. Did you know about this? In 1992, we had the first GPS satellites go up, and they used regular general relativity to calculate what they would need to do to keep them and maintain orbit. And they kept on drifting out of orbit. And they said, what the hell's going on? Well, there was a drift that the satellites were incurring that they never calculated, that they didn't account for, which when you start to look at that drift, it's exactly what was predicted by Michelson and Morley in 1902 to confirm the lumiferious ether. In other words, that the vacuum of space actually has various attributes that affect the median of space, or the transmedium of space. And once you start to integrate that into kind of general relativity's theoretical framework, you can start to begin to pull out electromagnetism. You can pull out the strong and the weak nuclear force. You can pull out the gravitational force, but then you can develop ideas on how to manipulate them. But then it also brings about is what is this field of existence? And you realize that in order for that field of existence to actually be there, there has to be a counter field. And that counter field, there's a great book out of there. It's called Space Counterspace. It's written by a physicist that never really got much recognition in the world, but it's a great read. And what he basically says is that we live in the expressed, expanded universe, and the antithesis of this is the Planck scale, which is a compressed or a replicate universe of which is in an oscillation pattern back and forth. And that these interdimensional beings, how they travel from one point or another, is actually by going into this counter space, which is basically a compressed version of the universe. And then if you think about it, 100 billion light years here is 100 billion light years, but in a compressed space, it's 2 miles. And so they would go into this counter space to actually transit the universe and move massive distances. And this is where you get into the idea of stargates and all these things. Now, in the idea of interdimensionality, I think that the concept that we're trying to talk about is phase transitions. And if you think about this in the context of frequency, is that imagine you have the full spectrum dominance of the universe. The universe is a scale of frequencies that has a full range that we can't even fathom. And that right now we only can interact and exist within a very, very small little slither of that spectrum, right? But if you increase that spectrum, if you have a being that can see this much of that spectrum compared to us, it's this much of that spectrum, they can exist and operate outside of the interactability of us because their frequency range is much wider. They live in a different phase transition of the universe.
So when someone dies and their soul leaves their body, that soul's operating at a different frequency.
Love how you got that. Now you start to understand ghosts and the paranormal. But when we talk about interdimensionals, this is what it's talking about. It's phase transitions of reality. Is that we are existent right now in a very, very slither of interactability of the universe. And when you expand that, that's how they're traveling. This is where they're coming from. When they say interdimensional, that's what at least this is what I believe. That's what they mean. if that makes sense to everybody out there.
No, it does. And it goes into a whole, there's a whole, there's a documentary I've been watching about why do we only utilize the organs in our body? And I was like, what? What organs do we have outside our body? And it said, we keep looking at ourselves as these isolated beings. We're not realizing that we are a part of Earth. Why aren't we using the tree to fill certain weathers? Why aren't we using the grass and the soil? When you realize that there's far more organs that we can connect with, then you realize how you can interpret the world a little bit different. Whole completely different show.
I love that.
A completely different show we can get into. I'll send you the link of what I've been watching. It's been so cool.
I'm gonna go watch that tonight. Shit, you need to send that to me after this.
But there's a lot to it. So as we get into this Matt Gaetz one, and I wanted to show these 3 quick shorts because
I wanted to put this in real quick.
Fire off.
So guys, right after this, I'm going to a live Q&A. And I did invite this son of a bitch right here in there, and he is going to be showing up. So if you're in Alpha's audience and you want to get into my live Q&A tonight, this is what you have to do. I just saw that Missy Temperance 1140 just became a premium subscriber on Alpha's YouTube page. So if you go subscribe to, if you're on Alpha's channel and you subscribe to his Substack, to his YouTube, or to his X as a premium subscriber, Alpha will send you the link tonight in those premium chats to join into that Q&A. So I'm putting that out there because I want everybody to be able to take part in this because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fucking questions.
It's going to be wild. That's for sure. But so these shorts, a lot of these over the last couple of years, they set us up for, we have just accelerated. We were like in cruise control, soft disclosure, drip, drip. And this last 10 days, it's like
fucking mind blowing.
Oh, like that would, and here's the thing that tells me they're on a timeline. When you have to accelerate information, that's because you're trying to pull the court of public opinion. And if you're trying to pull the court of public opinion, that means you have a timeline. That means they know where they're going and they're trying to get us there. So here's the last short. Now this one's creepy. This is not a good one. So just be prepared, folks. All right.
And I'll tell you more about what I believe this timeline is, or at least what I've heard.
All right. This one's going to give you the EVGBs, folks.
At one point, you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And the activity, and I got
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
Government and the little green people, right? That's very interesting. So now with that, I'll go straight into the Matt Gaetz clips. And then when you're ready for the other ones, you tell me. So now this is what's been recent. This Matt Gaetz one is probably about I don't even think a week old. Is it? Maybe
it's like 2 days old.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not old at all. So here you go. This is the Matt Gaetz one.
I mean, I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. An actual uniformed member of the United States Army briefed me on that.
Non-human biologics, interracial alien mating? What the F is going on? Look, wait a second. You had whistleblowers tell you this kind of thing? Can you please unpack that?
Yeah, I had a guy who was uniformed. He was a senior enlisted with the United States Army. Came into my office in Crestview, Florida, in a non-classified setting. I had members of my staff there. And what they explained is that the military ran a very secret program where aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans that had been abducted from war zones and from even the caravans of migrants. Now, again, I didn't verify this, but what the whistleblower was telling me is that there were like between 6 and 12 locations around the country where this happened. And what he wanted was a group, members of Congress, to all show up at the same time at all of these different locations so that any of those activities could not be moved. And of course, it's a physical impossibility to get members of Congress to simultaneously show up at like 8 locations at one time. And so that never occurred.
So I know who this guy was that talked to Matt Gaetz. At least I believe I know who this was that talked to Matt Gaetz. Number one is the first, I'm going to preface this because I like Matt Gaetz, and I don't think that he's trying to mislead people. He says a few words that I would rephrase. He says he was briefed. He's not briefed. This wasn't official military briefings, okay? This was a whistleblower who walked into his congressional office that was former Army that sat down with him. So I want to preface that. Number two is the guy wasn't senior enlisted. He was an NCO, non-commissioned officer, E5. You and I know that E5s aren't shit. And when you're in the enlisted ranks, you really ain't shit, especially when it comes to secret knowledge and stuff like that, right? My belief is, and this is who I believe it was, is Jorge Pabon. He was a sergeant in the United States Army. He was recruited by the intelligence agencies, or at least this is from his story. He had a whole life of alien contact, very similar story to Chris Bledsoe. Aliens had been interacting with him his whole life. The intelligence agencies got a hold of this. They recruited him, asked him to join the Army. He joined the Army and kind of went to the moon and did all these other things, right? At least this is who I believe it was. And why do I say that? Because he lives in Florida, around Crestview, in Matt Gaetz's district at that time. And he came out about 6 months ago on Redacted, did an interview with Clayton Morris, and basically correlated a lot of what Matt Gaetz is saying. So pretty sure it's Jorge Pabon. Now, does that discount what Matt Gaetz is saying? No. Because there's another clip that gets more into this, and you got to remember, this is an active member of Congress, and there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. You want to bring up that next clip?
All right, here we go.
I don't have the tinfoil hat on just yet, Congressman, but I'm wondering, kind of how you react to that, because you are connected. You're on the UFO subcommittee. I mean, I'm just wondering what you make of that. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. But I will say this.
Wait, seriously? Are you being serious, or is that tongue in cheek?
I'm being 100% serious. Okay. I've been 100% serious. I've been briefed by just about every alphabet agency there is. And I'll just tell you this. If they would release the things that I've seen, you would stay up. You'd be up at night worrying about or thinking about this stuff. We just need to disclose it all. I'm sick of it. Well, I was briefed. I'll just tell you this. I was briefed last week on an issue, 2 weeks ago, and it would have set the earth on. This country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. They would demand answers, and we need to. But it's never going to get. Unfortunately, it just keeps getting covered up, and the people that know are dying or disappearing, as the case may be.
Wow.
And for the record, I'm not suicidal, and I don't take risks. So,
I'm glad you said that. I'm speechless, Congressman.
We
will have you back.
You should be. And I told the president, release it all. And the problem is the people that are around the president don't know and the president doesn't know the questions to ask. A few of us are going to have to get with the president and tell him what he needs to ask and where he needs to look. I mean, we're in meetings and they give addresses and tell locations of items, I'll just say. And the public has a right to know, dadgummit. It's your tax dollars.
Absolutely.
Let's get it out there.
You got my attention, Congressman. I appreciate you being as forthcoming as you have been tonight, and we look forward to having you back. Look, I know Donald Trump wants to disclose something. He hasn't done it yet, but I think he wants to be the president to do that. Tim Burchett, thank you.
He does.
Okay. Finnerty's reaction. Did you see that? The moment that he goes, wait, hold on.
Are you serious?
Are you serious? Did you see his face after that? He's like, this is like, holy shit, this is real. Now, Tim Burchett, we're going to talk about that clip, but I want to play this one. This was today. Listen to this.
Roswell, Area 51, Wright-Patterson down in Dayton, my home state of Ohio. We've been hearing about this stuff now for 70 years, that we have it, we don't have it, that we've re-engineered it. No, we haven't. I know you can't talk about much because you're an active member, but just give me a wink. Are we alone?
No, we're not. We're not.
Holy,
alone.
Wait a minute. Did we just break that? Wait a minute. Is that April Fool's today, Tim?
No, it's second. No, we are not alone.
We don't make all them.
What did he just say?
We are not alone.
So take those two clips. Tim Burchett just said, I've been briefed by every 3-letter agency on this topic. If people saw and knew what I saw, what was shown to me, the world would burn, America would come unglued. On another show, he comes out and says, we are not alone.
Now, I want to just provide a very controversial question. I'm not saying that this is true. I just want us to consider this. And you definitely are one of the people that got me to kind of even look down this direction. When we think Epstein, we think human trafficking, child trafficking, blackmail, and leverage. But we know that this goes way into a much darker science, especially with kids and him wanting to breed. Now, we also know that there's been some disclosure into the Epstein files, but not a lot. Is it far-fetched or maybe too tinfoil hat or extremists to think our government, even though it's been very corrupt for many, many decades, it still knows that it has to operate within the confines of certain types of laws and policies? And this is why you get contractors and agents and assets that can kind of do things that limit the government or military or DARPA. Is part of the reason and the hesitation and the slow rolling out of the Epstein thing is because we keep looking at, well, Epstein was a blackmail operation. And what if it was far greater than that? And what if Epstein's operation was actually part of this military hybrid operation that was acting in the behest of the military, whether the military was, paying for it through black accounts, or whether the military was covertly providing assets and income and data to make sure that it happened, with some plausible deniability. Am I going too far out of bounds with this, man?
No. Anybody doesn't know, I've done an extensive amount of research on Epstein. And one of the things that you get to start tying Epstein into is obviously human trafficking isn't the right word for it. Okay. Child sex trafficking isn't the right word for it. Child procurement is the right word for it. And a lot of this was being pushed into biomedical research and genetic research information. And I tend to kind of categorize this into human genetic modification programs or hybridization. Epstein actually wrote about alien chimerization, is hybridization of human and alien DNA. And he was actually trying to get hybrid alien DNA. One of the reasons he was looking for ancient civilizations off the coast of Cuba and why he lived in the Caribbean so they could dive down there is to find the remnants of the ancient human civilization and find DNA to then replicate that DNA and integrate it into our current DNA, because he believed that human beings once possessed superhuman powers on this planet. Now, when you go into the idea of the CIA Finders program, when you go into people like Epstein, child procurement, you go into John of God running a baby farm in Brazil with thousands upon thousands of children being born each year. We come back to the same question that nobody ever asks. Because when you say child sex trafficking or human trafficking, the why is very easy. Well, it's money. It's about money, power, and control, and influence and compromise. But when you start to enter this new caveat into it, ask why. Why were they doing this? And that why is why people like Todd Blanche stepped in and stopped it. That why is why people like Dan Bongino were given false information, which he was believed to be true and correct, that Epstein didn't kill himself or that Epstein killed himself. It's the reason why that people like Kash Patel go down these rabbit holes and can't progress further down them. Because that why is so profound that it relates directly back to what Tim Burchett said. That the earth would burn and the world, America would come unglued. Now, in part of that conversation, he says, I was briefed 2 weeks ago on something that's happening right now. And I got the clip on that part that was further on in that clip. And the thing is then he goes and talks about General McCaslin, who's missing, and these scientists who are missing. And see, my belief is a lot of people in these black projects who have operated in it for a long time have been trying to blow the whistle on this. And they've been disappeared, removed from the chessboard, or just vanished. And I think that a lot of these people, these scientists, are fall within that boat. You can also align it that it's technological security and superiority, right? Is that people are competing in factions of technology and corporate contracts. Who's going to get the contracts for all this stuff? And you want to eliminate any competition. I got my scientist over here. Here's the other scientist. If he gets hired at this company, then we're fucked. So let's take him out. Right. You get this whole idea that comes out of this as well. That's not what this is about. There is something that is happening right now. And I believe that the reason that Donald Trump is doing what he is doing globally, why the Iran war is coming about, why we are reallocating the resources of the world back towards the United States of America, is because, remember Chuck Schumer came out? And you and I had never seen Chuck Schumer say anything like that. This is very, very serious, and he's got to in this administration has got to convince the American people.
First time I've ever seen him act like a real politician.
That's right, because this isn't. Yeah, we talk about in the geopolitical front, China and Iran and all these things, and that's a big part of it. From what I gather, is this is a crazy scenario. Hold on, I want to preface this because there's more here.
And listen, walk us through it. Somebody in the chat said it, and I was gonna bring it up later, but I was like, they brought it up here, so if they brought it up, other people are probably thinking it too. The Save America Act does have specific text referencing it shall be unlawful for any alien to vote. Now, we've always thought of alien as in an illegal from another country. What if alien doesn't just include someone from another country, but someone who's not completely human? And what if we get to the point in these disclosures, Josh, where we actually have the ability to determine who is an actual human and who's someone that looks like a human but ain't completely human?
So one of the things that Tim Burchett was briefed on by one of these 3-letter agencies, and this goes back to something that Bob Bigelow said and all this stuff. I'll say that. I said this in the space last night, and this is from good sources. If you're in the space last night, you know what I'm talking about. That they walk among us and they look like us. Now, I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to go back.
That's why I said secret DNA at the beginning of the beginning of class.
Jordan Maxwell, if anybody knows who Jordan Maxwell was, a friend of mine for quite a few years. And we used to have these long conversations on Saturday afternoons that would go into Saturday evenings. I wish I recorded them. And one of the things that Jordan Maxwell talked about when he was asked this question, that they walk among us and they look like us. And he says, no, you have that wrong. They don't look like us. We look like them. Now, if anybody can take the ontological shock of what I just said and understand it fully, then the next parts are going to make a lot more sense. This isn't Anunnaki 9-foot god beings. Okay. This is very, very real from what I gather. This is talked about at high levels of classified congressional fucking hearings. And I know because we have flies on the wall. I know a fly on the wall. I'll just say that much. There's 15 people in that fucking room and information comes out. I want to play something real quick. Okay. This is
paint our roofs blue, Josh.
This is Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll on the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army's birthday, and I want you to listen to what he says here.
As young Americans across the country get to see all of the amazing things that the Army has done, whether it's helping with floods in North Carolina or wildfires in California, or we talked to an astronaut yesterday who's on the moon, who's a soldier, including.
I'm going to replay that last part, Alpha. Tell me what you think of this.
Yesterday, who's on the moon,
I remember.
Soldier, including actually going to war and fighting to defend.
We talked to an astronaut who is on the moon, who is a soldier. Now, I asked General Quast about this the other day, and he said what was said for a reason. Okay? Because I said, look, a lot of people like me believe that the 1969 moon landing footage was bullshit. Okay? Stanley Kubrick admitted to doing it in a Hollywood basement. And guess what? It was. It was done in a Hollywood basement. And it was done in a Hollywood basement for national security reasons. Did those Navy, Army, and Air Force guys actually go to the moon? Yeah. All the Apollo missions that went to landed on the moon went to the moon. Except you never saw any footage of it. And the reason being is because in 1969, if that rocket, Apollo 1, took off and blew up in the sky or didn't make it to the moon, we lost the Cold War. We lost the space race to the Soviets. So it was a matter of national security that it was successful. So therefore, they ensured that Americans and the world, through psychological warfare operations, believed that that was actually happening. It did. But here's the thing. Is those moon missions that they did through Apollo, they were actually taking everything up there to build a moon base. And the U.S. military has had a presence on the moon since the 1970s. And there's a reason why we have a presence on the moon.
Is that why there's no point in searching for the missing scientists on Earth?
I think that the missing scientist on Earth is more of an Earth phenomena. I don't think it's. I think that it has to deal with what's going on around us and up there, but I think it's more of. I think McCaslin honestly is in hiding. So the timing was impeccable. Right after Trump says disclosure, he takes off. I think that he's in hiding by himself and he's doing it on purpose. I think these other scientists were killed because they try to be whistleblowers. NASA astronaut Mike Finke suffered a mysterious medical emergency on the ISS earlier this year while he was prepping for a spacewalk when he suddenly lost the ability to speak. You remember this back in like November, December? He was getting ready for a spacewalk. They had a medical emergency on the ISS and they had to send SpaceX up there to grab him and bring him back down. He completely lost the ability to speak and they have no idea why. Next. We've had 3-Eye Atlas. And then all of a sudden we have mysterious standards of deviation higher meteors hitting the planet over March. By the way, they're gone. We're not seeing them anymore. It was a very short time frame, almost like we went through the debris field of something and then it was over, because that's what I believe just happened, is that 3i Atlas was most likely some type of long distance alien probe that probably shot some things off towards the planet, and we blew the shit out of them. And then we went through the debris field of what that was. And I'm going to tell you the reasoning behind all of this. Now, there's some other context to this in the sense of interdimensionality. This is a little bit more, that's a little bit more fringe stuff. I don't know necessarily think I want to get into. There was something I was told 2 days ago about all this. And then MJ Truth actually came out and put this post out. And it reminded me kind of a little bit more of an angle of something that I was told. And I say that I was told because, I mean, shit, dude, I talked to a lot of people. He goes, as U.S. astronauts head back to the moon, let's remember what Space Force has said about the moon. When foreign powers can build bases on the dark side of the moon, when private companies are inventing a new economy beyond our planet. And then MJ says, I have often felt like there has been a war raging above our heads the last several years. The falling debris, the odd fireballs in the sky, so much more is happening than we are being told. I can't tell you how spot on he is right on that comment. This is the framework that I've developed over the years of understanding what's going on. Thousands of years ago, human civilization was absolutely annihilated. Any idea of an advanced civilization was destroyed by something. Someone, something, it wasn't human. They implemented mechanisms of control on this planet, overseers, Overwatch, bloodline families, to rule and monitor over humanity, whether it's for harvesting, whatever. We're not the top of the totem pole on the food chain. And that these overseers are meant to watch over the planet and secure their property. And that the New World Order, the One World Government, the secret societies, the occult, were preparing the world for their arrival. They were getting everything ready. This is what the control systems and structures were all about. This is what the suppression of technology has been about for the last 100 years. Why they suppressed the technology, so that we would never have the capability to defend ourselves against what they would consider to be their gods. 2016 changed that. When Donald Trump came in, he started dismantling all of those systems. Think about people as maybe even alien human hybrids, maybe derived through bloodline affiliation or association, that have ruled and controlled this world for a very, very long time. And they are being systematically dismantled. But at the same time, remember how I told you that if you go back to like the 1950s and Eisenhower's military industrial complex statement and how these black programs were hidden through DSRT and the CIA, they were hidden through Lockheed and all of these defense contractors. But remember when I told you that the deep state never had access to them?
I do.
That's confirmable. Obama, Clinton, Podesta, they never had access to these things. The Rothschilds, you want to know why? If they did, we would already be dead. We'd already be controlled. We'd already live in the slave matrix, and we don't. Which tells you that they never had control of it, which tells you that the reason why these reverse engineering projects, these black budget projects were all hidden was not to keep them from humanity, but to keep them from the enemy. To keep the enemy from knowing that we had this advancement. This is what the psychological warfare operations are all about in the context of all this information. And the reason being why is because of what someone said to me the other day. That we now have the technology that is hidden away, that is being brought back into executive authority under President Donald Trump to fight them. If they ever come back, and they're coming back. They're coming back, and we have the capability to destroy them when they get here.
Which is why we have this limited time window of why this disclosure has to be accelerated, because they knew once the cat comes out of the bag, that means it comes out of the bag for the bad guys as well.
That's right. And so when we start looking at accountability and justice and all if these people were working for those people, well, it's all going to be taken care of in one fell swoop. But I think that the reason why we're seeing limited capability in the war scenarios, we're not seeing a lot of these weapons being revealed or this technology being revealed, is because you have to keep it in the bag until it is time. And that there is an event I believe is coming 2027 this year, 2027, 2028, before 2030, that it's going to happen. And that I believe we're going to shoot the shit out of them out of the sky. Now, interesting enough, you just had Stephen Greer go on some show. What was it, Jesse Waters, or was he on Benny? He was on Benny. And he's talking how the military's shooting the good aliens out of the sky. Shut the fuck up. I'm sick of this shit, right? Like, we're shooting enemies that are going over military complexes and trying to disable our weapons and electronic systems. We don't just shoot UFOs out of the sky because they flew near an Air Force carrier, okay? Doesn't work that way. But the idea that we can shoot them down, it tells you one thing very, very important. We tend to look at technology as a level of critique of civilizational advancement. That because they can travel between star systems and go to different planets, because they have weapons that are fired through plasma, that they're somehow more technologically or societally or culturally or spiritually advanced than us. But that's not true. That just simply means that some civilization, whether transdimensional, whether extraterrestrial, subterrestrial, I don't know, means that they developed in a different environment with different understandings of how the universe operates and the laws of physics. Maybe they lived in a gravitational dominated world where there's some type of isotope that exerted gravitational force, and they learned to utilize that before they even learned about electricity and magnetism. And maybe their whole technological system is based upon this one isotope that exerts a gravitational force. And maybe their civilizational structure is maybe feudalistic human beings from 1400 years ago. But they've just had this advancement of technology because the force that they were able to master was powerful. And so now they can travel between the stars and they can conquer worlds with this technology, but their societal structure isn't very advanced. And their technology maybe not even be very sound. There might be things in the universe that they don't even know about, like electromagnetism and plasmas. What I'm trying to say is that just because maybe they came in here and beat the shit out of us 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago on this planet, maybe because they've had force and dominance over our planet for a 6,000 year period, it doesn't mean that they're more technologically advanced. It doesn't mean they're more societally or structurally advanced. It doesn't mean they're more intelligent than us. It just means that at one point in time, they had the upper hand. And now I think we do.
You know, a full-grown adult can show up to the mound of a colony of fire ants and start stomping the hell out of the first 30, 40, 50 that fire ants to come out of that mound. But once those fire ants start to come out of other mounds and start to attack the boot and ankle, and that full-grown human, because they choose not to leave and they stay in that environment, now has, 200, 300, 400 fire ants on them, they will they will be put into, an anaphylactic shock, and they will die. How can a species that's about a quarter of an inch in size, and we outweigh them thousands of times, come together and all attack at the same time to create something that's far bigger than them? It's death. And I always think about that concept when I think about, damn it, we're going into Independence Day. These aliens are coming. Well, how many are coming? And how many of us does it take to become the overwhelming force? And the other thing is I saw someone in the chat bring up Yuval Noah Harari, and that takes us to a certain bioweapon that was engineered. Everybody knows during that 2019, 2020, at least according to the narrative, that people had to put in their bodies, and we saw it affected the immune system. Why was there such a desire to weaken the human immune system? Is it because of just the concept of big pharma and or depopulation, or was it because there's someone that's en route to pick a fight with us, and our immune system is one of our greatest attributes, one of our greatest weapon systems that we have? I think
Maybe it wasn't flavor enhancements. Maybe it was something to actually protect us.
There's a lot of stuff, man, to think when you start to kind of pull the veil back and be like, we know what we saw, we know some of the stuff was bad, but what was the real motive? It's easy to buy off on the narrative that's being sold by mainstream media and alt media and Substacks, etc. But I mean, everybody kind of has. I mean, listen, when me and you, we talk to so many people on so many different social media platforms, and when all these people who don't have any connection to each other are all telling me the same thing, I know you've been told the same thing too. Man, I feel like we're on the edge of something. Like, that's a vibration, that's a frequency, that's something that I don't know, is it paranormal or what? That's that's mind speak, right? And then to go back to kind of how we started this conversation with the yogis, right? Do they tell us these things because they understand the power of manifestation? And if Burchett comes out on the show with, Benny Johnson or Dan Ball and starts to talk about these things, it's going to have millions of people seeing it at the same time and having the same thought process, maybe the same excitement, maybe the same concern, but there's a level of energy that goes into that. And, is there a power of manifestation there for all this? I don't know. I want to present questions. I have speculations and I have thoughts. What I do know is we're on the brink of something. That is, no one is going to convince me otherwise. I recognize the patterns in the military operations. I recognize the patterns in mainstream media. I recognize the patterns in the propaganda. I recognize, listen, there's for all the stuff that me and Josh do share and others from people that we trust, there's a list of things that are not shared for many different reasons. And I also tell myself, why is that? I know I'm not the only one that got that info, because I'll see which people do go out and post it. And so I know that there is information that is being put out there purposeful, not by accident. And so all that tells me is what? There's a war. There's a war that is unfolding right now. It's informational, it's psychological, but it's also not human. And so, that's the part we don't talk about enough.
Agreed. And I want to give a shout out to somebody because I find this really interesting. I went to X and I refreshed my feed, and Shadow of Ezra, anybody knows Shadow of Ezra, just reposted Army whistleblower came to once visited a secret civilization on the moon, and it's the Jorge Podon interview with Clayton Morris, which he posted it about the same time that we got finished talking about it on the show. So I'm assuming he's watching. And if he's watching, give me a heads up, brother. Just let me know you're watching.
There's a couple of people that he hangs out with, but that are definitely not friendlies to us.
But I want to actually point out the thing about ants, because this is really interesting. I was consumed by this thought one day, like, how many ants are there on this planet? Do you know how many ants there are on the planet?
I have seen this before. If I remember correctly, and I don't know if this is where you're going with, but that if ants decided to take on humanity, they have the numbers to actually defeat us. It was like some weird concept like that.
Well, they outnumber us 2.5 million to 1. There's 20 quadrillion ants within the planet. When you start to look at this, the weight, I think the dry mass of all non-carbon tissue is 40. Okay, so live wet mass. So 60%. I was looking for something. All ants together likely weigh an order of 50 to 100 million metric tons. Okay. Now, if they all came out of the ground and covered the entire planet surface, they would rise about 2 millimeters above the planet surface. Okay. So that means 2 millimeters off the ground, covering all ocean, all land, everything. Here's where it gets interesting. The average height of an ant is 2 millimeters. Okay. So 2 times 10 to the 16 ants times 2 millimeters is 4 times 10 to the 16 millimeters, or 4 times 10 to the 13th meters. That's 4 times 10 to the kilometers. In astronomical units, the Earth to Sun distance is 1.496 times 10 to the 8 kilometers. Right? So what that means is that if all ants came out right now and lined up one after another, all 20 quadrillion of them, they would extend 39 astronomical units past the orbit of Pluto to the heliopause. I want you to put that in the concept. 2 millimeters each, 20 quadrillion. If they lined up one on top of another, they would extend past Pluto. That's right underneath us. Now, if ants, by the way, and I always love making this scenario when people say, like, dude, aliens don't exist. I'm like, dude, there's 20 quadrillion ants underneath your feet. How many ants have you had contact with in your life? And what you actually find out, it's less than 1% of all ants will ever experience a human being. Think about that. Less than 1% of all ants will ever experience a human being. What does that mean? Think about if that ant was intelligent. It goes back and goes, dude, we just witnessed these giants out there. They have this whole world. And they're like, stop it, Tom, you fucking conspiracy theorist. You don't know what you're talking about. Humans don't exist. No, dude, come on. I'll show you.
Go get your leaves. Go get your leaves and sugar and shut up, bro. Get back to work.
But now just think, there's 20 quadrillion ants that have never experienced human beings before in their existence below your feet. What else potentially lives within the earth that you've never known, heard of, or experienced that's never experienced human beings before?
I'm there with you. I'm there with you. So here's, I'll get to our last, we'll set us up for our last ads. We'll do Rumble Rants, and then we'll let everybody know about the Q&A that's coming up. Here's what I'll say is, one, Representative Burchett is become one of my favorites, bro. Like, he has become one of my favorites. And when he comes out and he starts saying, hey, I ain't suicidal, is he, kind of being hyperbolic, considering it? I don't think so. When you look at the context of the recent headlines surrounding the scientists, missing and the ones that have been dead, even with the MIT stuff and all that stuff, like, there's legitimate, reason to be concerned. But with that understanding is President Trump knows. Like, if Tim Burchett knows, Trump knows.
Well, he says that I briefed the president on this.
So if Trump knows and he's making moves the way he is, and think about this in every flank that we're fighting on, Iran, the economy, everything. How many of those moves are not about the headline, but have to do with what Rep Burchett is actually talking about? How much stuff is being set up that we're thinking, oh, this is for no kings, or this is for Antifa, or this is to secure elections? Is it? Is that what it is? Is the Army QRF teams, the quick reaction forces that have been set up in every nation, is it because, I know me and you understand some things that are coming down the chain, and Trump's trying to present, be prepared for that when it presents itself? But is it just that? Or is there another reason that there would be unrest? If information comes out that there are these green guys and gray guys and others, do you need quick reaction forces to maintain society so anarchy doesn't break out? We've all seen the movies, Independence Day and all these other things. And I'm curious to that. Here's the other thing. And I'll give it right back to your Josh, and then we can get into the ads and the Rumble Rants. When one of the first markers I saw that something's going on was, and we've talked about this before, we have the largest U.S. military presence along our southern border in the history of the United States. And we were told that this is because of the immigration crisis, the narco trafficking crisis. But then Trump comes and tells us that within the first 10 days, that thing's shut down to nearly 98 to 100%. But yet the military presence kept increasing. And I started thinking, okay, well, we got the cartels. Cartels present a threat. We know that a lot of Chinese special forces were moved into Mexico. That presents a threat. But now part of me starts wondering, what if there's a different threat? And the reason I bring this up is because you said, what exists underground? Well, that brings us into the conversation for another show, I'm sure, of deep underground military bases. And they don't just exist in the United States. And what if there are things in these deep underground military bases in countries that are our neighbors, like Mexico and Canada, that warrant us executing caution? I don't know. I'll give it to you for your thoughts, and then we can get into our last ads.
Yeah. Well, how about this? Is go back to that idea that they walk among us and they look like us, and they have overseers on this planet who control finance, money, power, and governments. And what have those same people have done over the course of the last 100 years? They've developed mercenary armies through various different ancillary infrastructures. And so if they wanted to ensure that their side wins the war, what are they going to do? They're going to bring about that war destabilization to ensure that their side does win. And I'll leave it with one thought here. And you remember Tim Burchett's video that we just watched, right? So here's Tim Burchett's video that we just watched. And I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this. And then I'm going to scroll down below it. And look what General Michael Flynn says. I believe Tim Burchett. He's not a man to mince words or to short sell the normal political bullshit. But be aware of false flag alien operation by rogue elements inside the U.S. government. Now, did you know that General Flynn was actually denied access to a lot of this stuff?
I did not know that.
There are certain reports out there that state that General Flynn was trying to get access to this stuff during the first Trump administration. He was denied of it. Now, I want to go back and play a clip real quick that I'm going to bring up right here of an interview.
Oh my God, what he'll be able to discover. And frankly, I already knew a lot. I already knew a lot of the things that I wanted to dig into and I wanted to shut down or expose. Okay. And then of course, you know, now do I work with the president to maybe hold certain people or certain institutions accountable, right? They couldn't have that. Couldn't have that. And that's our problem. That's what I talk about in the movie. This is our problem, is that we have this extraterrestrial government that is running.
Have you ever heard that man say that word before?
I have not, bro.
Me either.
I love this clip.
And it's interesting how he says it. Okay, I want
this extraterrestrial talk about in the movie. This is our problem, is that we have
this extraterrestrial government. I think that tells everybody exactly what is going on here.
I'm with you. So I'll read. I'll do my Rumble Wallet one right now, and then I'll give you time to set up.
Well, you already did your Rumble Wallet one. You already got credit for it.
No,
I'm not going to give it to you twice.
It didn't let me do it earlier.
What do you mean? Did it pop it up?
No, it didn't even populate. I just got it now, and it's a different one too. So
okay, no worries.
I think it was my end, just because I had to, when you got to refresh the whole window.
Yeah.
And so here we go. So let me bring this up on the screen so you guys can scan this QR code. Here we go. Here's a little inside scoop that many creators are talking about behind the scenes. It's actually one of the reasons I'm using Rumble. They made a way to super chat creators so that we get paid immediately and without any fees. And this is a big deal for people like me and Josh, folks. YouTube and Twitch take up to 50% fees when you tip creators. This method takes none. That's right. The platform takes 0 fees. I and Josh keep nearly 100% of what you send me or us. You can super chat with Bitcoin, Tether USD, or even Tether Gold stable coins. The tip will show up directly on our Rumble chat, which I'll do my best to read. All you need to do is download the Rumble wallet on the App Store and send the tips to your favorite creators. You can go to wallet.rumble.com, or you can download the app directly from the App Store. Seriously, what an amazing way to get rid of the middleman and help the creator economy. Shout out to Rumble for making this disruptive technology. And if you're like, I don't see a QR code on the screen, that's because you got to be watching on Rumble to see that. And if you're watching the replay, do us a solid. We appreciate you taking time to watch the replay. Go down in the links of mine and Josh's shows and click all the links to the people that we're partnered up with, sponsored, and affiliated with. And with that, Josh, I'll give it to you while I get the Rumble rants ready.
All right. Let me see here. And I got to go into here. Let me see if I can find one real quick to run a second one. And them some of bitches. All right. Go ahead and run this one real quick. Still haven't tried 1775 coffee. Now's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped. Only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits hard, the smooth medium roast, and the vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus, no crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin free and mold free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic. A frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler. $170 worth of coffee and gear. Yours for $99. This is for the ones that have been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit today before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does.
That's what I'm talking about. And with that, let's give a shout out to some of our YouTube audience members. First one to Dash and Eyes, $5. Thank you. Happy Easter. Awesome show. Thank you for that. Another one that shows up here all the time to support us. Soar047 dropping us $10. Patterns Matters, sending you mosquitoes. Happy Easter to you and your fam. Listen, I got PTSD from mosquitoes. As a matter of fact, I got a special little device, y'all. Special little device that has this special light that attracts them, a fan that sucks them in, and then plugs them into this paper that I gotta change because Anthony Fauci's trying to take me out with skeeters. And then we got some new members. Shout out to Kathy Besselman 744, who became a YouTube member. And shout out to Laura Gamez 3968, who became a YouTube member. So thank you guys for that support. We'll be getting that link to you guys for that premium subscriber only Q&A that we'll be doing. And here's my Rumble rants, and then it'll be all on you, Josh. Dollar for dollar from Outa. Got a couple of them here. I think they might be sequential. Is it aliens, or is it that after World War II, all the tech and research was confiscated, brought to the U.S., and continued to be worked on? When people start seeing this stuff, aliens are created to give cover. Definite possibility. Or it could have been alien stuff that was found in World War II that we're all trying to fight to see who was going to get to it first. Continuing with Outa. And now people aren't even thinking about the super advanced human tech part anymore. Now they're stopped into having a worldview shift that the government is lying to us about aliens. Well, I'll tell you this. I definitely trust the general. And when the general says that there is a weaponized portion to look out for, that tells me there are some people that are going to try to push an alien psyop. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Because remember, a psyop doesn't exist unless it has a majority truth involved in it. You just got to filter out with discernment to figure out what the truthful part is and which part's the manipulation. And Outa continuing, an added calculated benefit to this psyop is now you created a whole fringe alien subculture that you feed for decades through Rockefeller funding that you can use for whatever you need in the future. And then finally, Burchett saying, if we knew, the country would go crazy. Well, when people find that their wealth has been drained for advanced tech that could have been made civilizations hundreds of years more advanced, instead it's been kept from the world, then we're given fake science and physics to be dead ends, to keep you in a decaying dark age, controlled, sick, and poor. Yeah, I think people are going to want heads. What if the scientists being killed are the exact people to disprove this nonsense? Now the Pope getting more priests to conduct exorcisms for future demons coming. Come on, people, wake the fuck up. There's some parts in there I can definitely see on that Outa, but there's also some things that do expand upon this. You know, there are a lot of people and sources that provide information where it's not just reading, but actual firsthand experiences. And those firsthand experiences, people can't explain them, even the people that experienced it. So with that, Josh, I'll give it to you for any Rumble rants that you have.
Yeah, I had a few come in. The first one I couldn't see who it was from because the creator sponsor thing in the chat box. I didn't hit my red box, so I didn't get them all in. But they said, I would like you guys considering doing a show on modern day prophets. A lot of crazy predictions. My wife seems to fall for a lot of these. I'm a lot more skeptical. Bro, I'm right there with you. And this is a great, because we got Paula White out there like, miscarry those satanic babies. Did you hear this shit? Miscarry those satanic babies. Look, Paula White is evil. That's an evil bitch. And I'm tired of these. And you get them all over Rumble. I showed you a few. We were talking about that one day of these quote unquote modern day prophets. Listen, guys, let me kind of sum this up very, very easily with a lot of these modern day prophets. If God is all knowing, all seeing, everywhere all at once, if he wanted to bring a revelation to humanity, why wouldn't he just tell everybody at the same time the same thing? And say, hey, this is God speaking. Here's my revelation. And then someone goes, oh my God, God just spoke to me. Well, God just spoke to me too. Okay, let's check it. And the whole world would know instantaneously. Instead, he chooses one person that's trying to accept credit cards. Just saying. Prophet. There's a reason why the English word prophet has two derivative meanings. Next, Lee Walden, and that was a $20 Rumble rant. Thank you so much, brother. Lee Walden, $5 Rumble rant. Ahoy, Josh and Alpha. Your passion and scholarship are very much appreciated by this old airman. The journey of discovery keeps me getting up every day. Thanks, troop. Where we go, one we go all. Thanks so much, Lee. We'll see it in that chat. RPG 3573, $20. Thanks, Josh. Thank you so much, RPG. And hopefully you can show up to the camping trip this year. And Lee Walden again, 3-Eye Atlas from the Sagittarius, 5 million light years. Target was Mars. Then on Jupiter, it's outside the ecliptic. It is without question not of this earth. 100%, brother. Appreciate that. And I'm looking to see if there's any more that came in on Rumble. I had none on YouTube that I could see. I went and actually just pulled up my YouTube studio. And then Lisa Eckerly, 61 Eckerly's $5 Rumble rant. So the cover in a nutshell is this all good versus evil. 100%. Good versus evil. Good call.
And got one here in the last second too, which is awesome. Shout out to Missy Temperance 1140, who became a YouTube member. And like I said, a few minutes following the show, you guys make sure you look into those subscriber chats. That's where the link to the Q&A is going to be posted on the different platforms. I also want to share something with you guys. Not aliens. I don't know. Maybe if someone found it 100 years from now, they would think it's hieroglyphics. My little princess made this for me and gave it to me. And this is how she sees herself and daddy.
It's funny. She made herself bigger than you.
She did. And she made sure not to give me hair. So I'm definitely blessed. Any final thoughts, brother? If not, we'll get ready for this Q&A.
No, so for everybody on the Red Pill Project, if you do not know how to go get a premium subscription, you go on to redpills.tv, you go to premium tab, and under there, there's going to be YouTube, locals, you're going to have Substack, X, and Social Red Pill, which is my private social network. Any $5 subscription is going to get you into live Q&A. The Q&A link will be posted in the direct feeds and on those platforms as under the premium subscribers. So YouTube, go to your post. On X, go to your post. You will see it. On Substack's the only difference. It's in the private group chat. And so you just go to your chat on the Substack page. It'll also be sent to email. Under Decentralized Media, you'll see it there. And then I will send that link over to Alpha, and he's going to send it out to all of his premium subscribers on the same places that he has those subscriptions. So I will see you guys here in just about probably 5 or 10 minutes while we join into the Zoom.
And don't judge me because I'm going to be eating during this Q&A because I'm starving. So I don't want nobody to be judging. Alpha's eating on camera. Yeah, I am because I'm hungry. Enjoy one of the oldie songs that we have on here from Overwatch and the Guardian, the OG show. Catch you guys in the next one. God bless. Simplify.
When the lights go global, Legends go live. There's a war in a signal, a ghost in the feed. They rewrite what you saw, then they tell you believe. They sell you a savior, they stage you a fight, keep you divided while they move at night. But two men broke the screen like glass in the storm, saw the cover behind the chaos, saw the shape of the swarm. When the deep turns darker and the truth feels gone, they don't run from the fire, they drag it into dawn. You can't fake this kind of vision, you can't pretend this kind of hate, for the cage is built in silence, for the life they love to take. So let it rise, let it roll, let the whole damn system shake. Overwatch, the Guardian, say it loud, let the whole world hear. Digital soldiers, last protector from the cowards hide. They appear the storm, the truth, they hit like thunder, never disappear. Some call them watchers, some call them heroes, but the world gon' know their name right here. Overwatch, nigga sharp, mind like a blade, intel unmatched. He's a trap in the shade, by the clip, pulls the whole way down. Turns whispers in the booth, turns panic in the ground. The Guardian, Marie Forge, you got 4 hands. Tactical operator ran the hardest backlane from rifles to microphone, same old, same fight. Now the mission's on the air and the target's in sight. Let them copy your words, let them cosplay your pain. We'll pretend to watch the title, but they can't stand the rain. Cause legends don't burn, legends don't break. They turn passion into flame. Overwatch, the Guardian, say loud, let the whole world hear. Digital soldiers, last protectors where the cowards hide. They appear the storm, the truth, they hit like thunder, never disappear. Some call them watchers, some call them heroes, but the world gon' know their name right here. Overwatch and the Guardian. They're on the TV screens, she phone screens, and in the shadows where the real war breathe. They don't chase clout, they chase the network. They don't play nice, they break the script. Star on the flag, glory in the fight, stripes in the blood, humble in the price. Matrix